Hello, I'm Austin Wilson, research analyst at Hixon Zuercher Capital Management.
And I'm Josh Robb, Director of Wealth Management at Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. And today we're going to be looking back at February and what the markets and economy did, and also looking forward to what we may see going into the early spring.
Yep, so let's start with the markets. February performance was not quite as good as January.
Yes.
So after a really rough 2022, January rebounded quite strongly, if we recall. February had a little bit of a pullback. Not much, but a little bit. The S&P 500, it was down 2.61%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 4.19%, so that's a little bit worse. NASDAQ down 1.11%. Developed international stocks, they were down 3.28%. Emerging market stocks did fare the worst, down 6.54%, while bonds were down 2.59%. So giving up a little bit of January's gains, but still positive for the year.
All right. So in sports news, there was another doping scandal in bike competitions.
Yep, cycling.
Katrina Nash, she's from the Czech Republic. She's a mountain biker and a cross-country skier, has been in the two Winter Olympics, 3 Summer Olympics, and she tested positive for trace amounts of a banned substance in her system.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Now, she's had like a 30-some year career. I think her first Olympics was like in 1996. She's the president of the association over there, has always had a clean record, but she tested positive. She had trace amounts, 0.07 billionths of a gram per milliliter, which is hardly anything, of a substance called capromorelin.
Oh, I hate that stuff.
Yeah. So it was small amounts, and this stuff wasn't mentioned in the ban list, but it was in the other prohibited category. And so they're trying to figure out where this came from, like they always do. Turns out that she was applying or giving her dog medicine. Her dog was sick, and it got on her hand and absorbed through her skin. And that's how she tested positive. And actually, the USADA, which is the group of scientists who do all this for the Drug Association for the Olympics, they applied the medicine to their own skin
to test the same thing.
And within days, they were testing positive in there.
So she was given a clean bill of sale.
So here's the weird thing, though, is the way the rules are written, they still had to announce it publicly, even though they knew it was minuscule amounts and was inadvertent through contact of a normal, just what you do in life. They still had to announce it, and she still, it didn't affect her, but she was, while they're investigating, not allowed to do certain things. It just totally disrupted her life. She said, though, she wouldn't change anything because her dog needed the medicine and she had to give it to it. But in struggling to get it in the dog's mouth, got it on her skin.
I would probably do the same for my little Samson.
She suggested they maybe adjust their rules.
Threshold, maybe.
Yeah, or just before, figure out what it is, especially when it's that small amount, because people have tested positive through kissing or physical contact with their spouse who had a substance, and then they tested positive. So maybe adjust your rules a little bit for those minuscule amounts.
No kissing.
Yeah, apparently.
Okay. Number 2, inflation. Eventually, we're going to stop talking about inflation.
Well, it's always here.
It is, but hopefully
not this high amount.
Hopefully, at some point, it is in the rearview mirror of being high and kind of just in the background, just kind of going at a normal 2 to 3% pace. Mm-hmm. We're not there. So inflation cooled less than expected for the month of January, which is the numbers we got in February. So headline consumer price index is all encompassing, came in at 6.4% year over year. That was down from 6.5% year over year the month before, but above the 6.2% estimate. And even when you strip out food and energy, which are pretty volatile on their own, core CPI was up 5.6% year over year, which was, again, down from the prior month of 5.7% year over year, but above the 5.5% estimate. So, in fact, one interesting factor is that last month, so the month before, CPI was actually down month over month, 0.1%.
Yep.
But then it went back up by 0.5% month over month.
It's not slowing down quite like
it's not slowing down
hoping.
as anticipated, which is one thing that's going to lead to my next topic in a minute.
All right. So, Austin, question for you. If it is 10 o'clock here, what time is it on the moon?
Ooh, I heard about this. I don't want to ruin the story.
So, no one knows.
I know.
Or there's not a set standard.
Technically, it goes by where the people who launched time zone.
Yes. So, each country, whoever's launching the mission, they use their own time zone.
So, in the U.S., we would typically launch out of Texas or Florida.
Yes.
So we would
Eastern
use
or Central.
Eastern or Central time zones for the whole mission.
Yes. From takeoff to coming back, you stay on that time zone.
Correct.
The problem is you have a lot more collaboration. For instance, you have the International Space Station, which
Time
has...
out.
Well,
Did you know that we
that.
just sent a mission to the International Space Station recently?
okay.
And on that mission was a Russian cosmonaut. We're collaborating with Russia again.
We are. And they're all hanging out there together.
They're all in cahoots.
So the concept is, hey, we need a set standard. And I thought, well, that seems like they classified this as an urgent need. And I thought,
urgent.
why is it so urgent? But here's the deal. Like if you're communicating between countries and you're talking about very important things and you're not on the same page of when that's supposed to happen, that could be a big deal. Yeah. So the International Space Station uses coordinated universal time, or UTC, which is not how it's coordinated universal time. But anyway, which they use the atomic clock as their standard for that. So I don't know, maybe they'll use that for the moon. But in general, I get why it's pretty important, especially if you have a couple of different countries collaborating and they say, hey, let's do it at 3 o'clock. And
space time.
That's a different 3 o'clock for everybody.
We need space time.
Yes. So there you go. We may have a new time zone.
We might. And just in the time that we hopefully lose
Get rid
daylight
of the
savings time.
Maybe they'll be on daylight savings.
They will, always, because they're moon savings.
That's right.
All right, number 3, as I mentioned, this kind of all ties together with inflation, but in response to the hotter than expected inflation, the Federal Reserve delivered yet another interest rate hike, right? So this time we knocked it down another notch. We went from 75 basis points, or 0.75% down to 50 last meeting, down to 25 this previous meeting here on February 1st. But it now seems likely, because inflation keeps being hotter than expected, labor market's still very strong, retail sales are very strong, consumers looking pretty good. You're probably going to get up to 3 more rate hikes, probably 25 basis points or 0.25% throughout the rest of the year. Actually, probably in March, May, and June, and then holding rates at that level throughout the rest of the year at this point. So, monetary policy, so what the Federal Reserve is impacting, the cost of borrowing money, how easily money moves, that is certainly in a different world than it had been really for decades. Mm-hmm. We're in a little bit more tight monetary stance.
For sure. So Pablo Escobar was the
familiar
cartel down there in Colombia. There's an issue they have at his former estate or ranch. He imported 4 illegal hippos. The hippos weren't illegal, but he illegally imported them. They weren't doing anything nefarious. But the problem is he imported them because he wanted them on his ranch.
They got free.
No, they're still hanging around.
Really?
The problem is, though, he's not around anymore.
No.
This is kind of an abandoned place now. It's a pretty big area. They've grown, not just in size, but in numbers. And so there is an estimated about 130 hippos in the area now, and they're slowly starting to head out to the rivers and head different places. So they're proposing taking 70 of those and moving them to other countries who have places set up for them. You know, they have sanctuaries for them, because there is no natural predators.
No,
and they're disrupting. They're disrupting.
Because hippos, they're very aggressive. They're actually more dangerous than things like lions and crocodiles in Africa.
Oh, yeah.
They kill more people every year than those other groups, which is surprising to me, because you're like
3 tons though. They're big.
Hippo. They're fast though.
They're fast, mean,
big
territorial.
Mouths. Yeah.
So long story short, they think that population could grow up to 400 hippos in 8 years if they don't do something about it, which would totally disrupt their ecosystem. So,
that's so
big
funny.
problem. Went from 4 of his pets to now
could be 400.
A big problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
craziness. All right, we had to talk about it. China's been a point of focus around the world, but specifically for the U.S. But lately, one of the biggest things was that we tracked this balloon. Really, we started tracking it. We heard about it when it was around the Alaska area. Right. This was a balloon that we had no idea why it was there. It was 60,000 feet in the air. It was a mystery. Mm-hmm. It was later determined that it was a Chinese balloon, and China had claimed that it was really there it was a rogue weather balloon, is kind of what they said. We eventually shot it down over the Atlantic off the coast of South Carolina and have attempted to retrieve all of the pieces of it that we could and determine if it was used for anything else, because there is large suspicion that it was actually used for spying. So that has put a bit of tension on the already strenuous relationship between the U.S. and China.
All right. So National Park Services released a alert informational update, and they said, if you are encountering a bear in the wild, please do not push down your slower friend to escape. They actually said that.
That would be
their new suggestion.
Very mean.
Yes. Well, that was always the joke, is you don't ever have to be faster than bear.
Be faster than the other guy.
Just be faster than the person with you. But they said, if you come across a bear, never push a slower friend down, even if your friendship has run its course.
They actually had to put that statement out there.
It was
that is so
more
funny.
of a joke tweet, but that was their suggestion, is there's other ways to avoid that.
That is funny. So my fifth and final point,
yes.
Circling back to something we talked about last month. So President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan went to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And it's currently nearing the end of the hearings of what's being discussed around that. However, the Supreme Court has yet to issue their final decision. They're supposed to be giving that by the middle of the year or so. At this point, however, it does seem that it is unlikely that it is going to go through as submitted. A lot of different reasons for why certain pieces of that were probably unconstitutional, but wait for a final ruling on that. However, at this point, it seems unlikely.
All right. And finally, there was a new Guinness World Record. Florida woman completed a ultramarathon, 31.1 miles.
That's a lot.
Yes. But she did that for 23 consecutive days. She ran 31.1 miles for 23 consecutive days, every day. She beat the record, which was 22. She said the hardest part was actually eating enough calories every day.
I'm sure.
Because her body was like, stop eating. And she's like, well, I need that energy.
Yeah.
She actually said she could have gone farther, but she had to stop because she had to go back to work. And so she set the record and then had to go back to work.
So funny.
Yeah. That's a lot of running.
I've done one half marathon.
Yeah.
And I'm probably good.
Yeah.
That was not near.
I've watched a half marathon.
It was
pretty
not,
good.
And after that, I rewarded myself with food.
Yeah, a lot of food.
I will say that. All right, well, as we mentioned earlier, Austin Wilson and Josh Robb here with Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. Please remember that nothing we talked about today is a recommendation, but if you have any questions...
Except for the National Park Service.
Yeah, don't push down your friend.
Yes, that is a recommendation.
So be on the alert if we go together.
Yeah. Let's just watch out. Stay arms away.
But nothing we talked about financially is a recommendation. But if you have questions about your financial situation, feel free to give us a call at 419-425-2400 or email us at hello@hzcapital.com.
All right.
Until
Talk to you next month.
Bye.
Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. This is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hixon Zuercher Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.